Today, some tips for shooting in super windy conditions, and I mean windy. Some highlights from last week's trip to the Palouse, and how shockingly much fun I'm having with GoPro's new little Hero 9. Hi there everyone, Hudson. Welcome to this week's Approach in the Scene. I want to thank everyone who's been liking, sharing, and subscribing this channel. It's a huge plus for me to see it growing, and I want to welcome all the new subscribers and thank everyone for sharing, liking, and subscribing. Today there's a bunch of fun stuff. I'm going to give you a few tips on shooting in really windy conditions. I just got back from a week shooting in the Palouse, doing some video content with my good friend Rick LePage. And it was windy and beautiful, and it's the kind of place where you want to do a lot of long lens work where you need to be locked down and solid. So I'll talk about some of the techniques that I used for doing that, show you some of the results, and give you a little tour of one of my favorite places in the country, a place I've led workshops, and we had so much fun. We're talking about doing a workshop next spring there, so keep an eye out for that. And I also want to talk just a little bit about, you know, this is the first trip I've taken this new little Hero 9. Costco had a great deal on them, and I was just like, you know, I haven't had one since the 7. I like the 7 a lot, but I heard some fun things about the 9. I thought I'll give it a shot. Plus, it has this little front-facing screen that's really nice for someone like me that's constantly talking to the camera like I am right now. It lets me actually see what's framed up and talk to it. So, you know, for example, you can see yourselves right there in the front. So we'll talk about all of those things in, well, let me talk about the GoPro first, since some of the stuff that I'm going to show you comes from it. What's better about the 9 than the 7 that I had before, or that any other GoPro that I've had? Well, the front screen's nice. Its ability to shoot into high dynamic range scenes, like backlit scenes. I had shots of my good friend Rick on a really windy evening, setting up his tripod with the sun right behind him through this haze. And an older GoPro would have flared and had all kinds of weird artifacts and ghosts and things. And this thing handled that intense backlight where it couldn't manage all the dynamic range in a really nice way, just in its auto settings. GoPro for the last couple generations has had a pretty amazing microphone. I've just been shocked by how good the audio quality is when you're speaking to it. But there was a night when we were out that was windy, the topic of our whole discussion here. It was ridiculously windy, and you know, I was thinking about how great stone bags are, which I'm about to talk to you, and my good buddy Rick had just carried this huge rock, you know, several hundred yards down the hill from where we'd parked El Jefe, the van, my big Sprinter van, which was rocking too hard to consider bracing against. The wind was blowing so strong. And I just thought, you know, I'll film him dropping the rock. I filmed myself walking down, and the image stabilization in the camera is just shocking. I'm just walking along, filming myself in the wind. Then I filmed him, you know, dropping his rock and talked to him, and I figured the audio is going to just be unusable. I have no wind mic on here. I didn't go and adjust the settings. I just have its auto wind reduction mode on. And then I filmed him setting up his stone bag. He dropped the straps down here to get it taut so it wouldn't shake in the wind like this, and put his big rock in, and he talked to me while he did it. And the audio is pretty darn stunning. Check these clips out.
You place it. You don't drop it.
And again, I don't, you know, I have no affiliation with GoPro whatsoever, just like I have none with Nikon. I just like to talk about the things that I find that make my job easier and that I love working with. And this camera, the simplicity of its user interface, you just sort of swipe across its touchscreen to flip from time-lapse, time warp mode to video mode to still mode, and you can create custom presets for the settings that you want for each mode and just tap that custom preset in whichever mode you're in, and boom, you're off to the races. Really easy to use. And some of the video that I shot just driving around in the Palouse, which is one of my favorite things to do there, just driving those crazy back roads. I tried its time warp feature, just its basic 4K time warp setting, and it just, the videos that it created with me just holding this out the window with my arm bumping around while Rick was driving the van. It speeds everything up to give you this insane sort of hyper warp scene, and it was just incredible how much fun watching the clouds move and the roads fly around us. I was really impressed with how stable and how high a quality of video this thing produces. So I'm excited to be using it. I'm excited to play with my kids in the water with it and kiteboarding and a bunch of other things, and probably more content for approaching the scene. And if anybody's thinking about a little camera, the other great thing about it, and this is true of the 8 too, is that its little kind of GoPro mount is built right into the camera itself. So no more, that folds in if you want, no more needing to put some kind of a case around it. And both the memory card and the battery and the USB-C charger are under one waterproof door in the side that you don't have to take it out of its mount to access. It's just much simpler to use. It's a great, great design. Love it. All right, so let's talk about this. You already saw. In dealing with wind, my biggest tool is this stone bag. You know, I've got 2 versions on my ATS gear links. This is my favorite. I'm going to put a link to it in the video's description, along with a link to the GoPro and anything else that I'm talking about here, or any videos that I talk about. You just click on the video's title or show more, depending on your platform. You can link right in there. There's also a table of contents for you to flow through and see whichever part of this you want with clickable time codes. That's all accessible there, along with links to all the gear that I use that are updated constantly at atslinks.com or at hudsonhenry.com/atslinks. Sorry, I'm still sleep deprived from this trip. We were having so much fun shooting. But the stone bag, putting some weight in this thing turns my 7-pound system that I love so much into a 27-pound system if I've got this sandbag with me. Whatever big chunks of rock I can find to drop into it, well, to set into it, as Rick let us know, so that you don't break these nylon straps. You set rocks in there, and all of a sudden you're just rooted to the spot. And we were shooting in just insane winds like this. So yeah, it's kind of windy here. And just by having this weight in the tripod, I would set it up a little bit lower. I only have it raised so high to show everyone here. I was working with a 500 millimeter lens in just ridiculous, probably sustained 40-mile-an-hour winds with gusts higher than that. I was working with the 500 with my 70 to 200. I was filming Rick at 200 millimeters as he was working with his camera in some of the windiest conditions that we had. On the Manfrotto 500 AH, which people often ask me, is it strong enough to work with long lenses? Yes, it absolutely is. And if you root your tripod with a stone bag, you can make a lighter weight tripod just as rock solid. And yeah, it worked magically. I think I'm just going to address it really quick because I get a lot of questions about this. The Manfrotto 500 AH, that is my favored head. It's mainly built as a video head, and so when you read the specs for this head, whether you're on B&H or wherever you happen to go, it's spec'd for doing smooth video movements. How heavy of a camera can it do smooth pans and tilts for capturing action with video? It's not giving you a recommended weight for locking down the system. I mean, this locks down my old school 400 with a 2x teleconverter and a Pro DSLR. No problem at all for stills. It balances. It's just, it would be difficult to do smooth video motions. You'd need a much bigger, much more expensive video head to be able to smoothly start and stop movements when you're shooting video, unless you're really skilled and practiced like my friend Andy at it, who makes this head work for just about everything he does in major productions. He's a great filmmaker and uses this head almost exclusively. He has a big Cartoni for times when he's in the studio, but this head's his field head. All right, so having all that weight there, maybe bumping your ISO up just fast enough to be able to maintain a reasonable shutter speed. I wouldn't want to go too low with a really long lens, although I was shooting some things at a pretty slow shutter speed with my 500 down to an 80th of a second. I wouldn't want to get down to where I'm at a really slow shutter speed with a long lens, even with the weight, just because sometimes the wind was buffeting so hard. You know, another thing we did, we were shooting the moon set while it was partially eclipsed on the blood moon, the blood supermoon that we had out there. And we set the van in the parking area that we found on Steptoe View upwind of us and worked in the lee of it. And the wind was still whipping under the van and into us, and we still had our stone bags, but it really helps having some kind of a windbreak, looking for some kind of a windbreak, trying to set up if you have the opportunity on one side of a building where you're in the lee of it or a rock. Using the stone bag, this is just a great, cheap tool to really help you maintain more stability in high wind situations. I guess, you know, that's really the tricks that I would say. If you're hand holding, you know, the night that we got up there was just a beautiful sunset. I rolled into Colfax and Palouse a little bit late. I was coming from Portland. We talked on the phone. Rick got us takeout from a Mexican restaurant. We woofed it in the hotel. It looked marginal, but there was a little bit of a break in the clouds to the west, and most of the photographers, it was so windy, we could see them all rolling into the hotel complaining of wind, and we drove up Steptoe while all the cars were leaving, and then the sunset was incredible. And we got there a little late. We didn't even get the tripods and the stone bags out. We tried to brace against El Jefe as the sunset was just turning spectacular, and the van was rocking and buffeting in the wind. And so instead, we used good technique, cranked up the ISO a little bit, watched our shutter speed, and handheld. And just, you know, you just brace, you put it in continuous high speed capture so that every time you hold down the button, it's just bap, bap, bap. And you fire in, say, 3 or 4 round bursts, because the first push might get some shake from pushing the button, and the second or third should be smoother. And you keep those elbows tucked in tight, feet shoulder width apart, your weight balanced over the balls of your feet, knees slightly bent, and just fire off frames handheld. At sunset, that was absolutely adequate to counter the wind. Plus, you know, there's vegetation blowing around, so a little faster shutter speed is going to help you in those situations. All right, with all that said, I think we'll wrap up by just taking you on a little picture through one of my absolute favorite places to shoot, Eastern Washington's rolling farmland, the Palouse. Oh wow, something I almost forgot, and I need to slip it in here. F-Stop is having a big 15th anniversary 15% off sale, and it only goes through the first week of June. So if you've been looking for a new photo pack, you know, I've been using these packs from long before I was an ambassador. I've been using them for most of the 15 years they've been in existence, and I really wouldn't use any other photo-specific bag. You know, their harness system is just second to none. My back is really thankful for me putting heavy loads on this quality of harness. I love their easy access panel and just the way the bags are laid out with a photographer in mind. The modular ICU system is great. I use the Tilopa most of the time. I sometimes use a bigger Suka. I'd probably recommend for most of you the Tilopa, the Anja or the Lotus, the smaller than Tilopa bag size. I love the medium slope ICU and the large Pro ICU. Those are removable, swappable internal camera inserts that are really well made, really well designed. As I said, I've had 4 of these packs over the years, and the 2 that I'm not using now are still in heavy-duty daily rotation with friends of mine that I've sent them on to. They just build great packs. I love those guys, and I'm happy to be an ambassador for them. So I'm going to put links to those 3 bags in the ICU in this video's description for you. All right, so let's go for a little fun trip through the Palouse on a windy trip. I've been here multiple times. It's often a little bit windy. This was extreme wind. This was Patagonia-like winds. And I could go into full screen view, but I thought you might enjoy seeing the exposure settings, camera, all that stuff, and what lens I'm using in different situations. I tend to knock around with my 24 to 70 f4S on my Z7 II all the time these days. This is Steptoe Butte. It doesn't look like such a big butte, but in this eastern region of the kind of flat scablands of eastern Washington over near the Idaho border, It's the tallest thing of prominence, and it's a couple thousand feet up, and it provides these just stunning views of the surrounding farmscape. And you're going to hear me reference Steptoe quite a bit. So here's El Jefe up there on that first night that I arrived, and we decided to chance going up there in case there was a good sunset. And I swear we were maybe the only two photographers up there because the wind was just no joke. It was serious. I'm not going to subject you to the audio from my Google Pixel 5 phone, but I think from just watching, this is Rick. We put the van, so that we could have the wind behind it. So this is him trying to talk to me in the lee of the van, which is how we shot that moonrise. We had some time that wasn't this windy, but the first night and the last night were just insanely windy. Here's a video of me just out in the wind. This is with my back to the wind, trying to tell the camera that it's windy. And again, that's my Google Pixel phone, and it doesn't handle the backlight nearly as well as and there it is with the wind in my face. It was just insane. It was peeling my eyeballs open. So that's how windy we're talking about. Really severely windy. All right, but a beautiful sunset, and we really made hay. You couldn't brace against the van. As I said, the van was rocking and bouncing and not a stable thing to brace against. So we ran around. I ran up my ISO a little bit when I needed to. Obviously, shooting straight into the sun, not a problem. You've got, at f6.3, I was at 1250th of a second for these shots. But, bouncing it up a little bit to keep that shutter speed up. There's plants blowing around. Rick's moving in the wind. His hair's blowing everywhere, and I want him nice and sharp. Again here, this is with the 14 to 24. There were a lot of plants. They're blowing around some. You can see there's blur to them, but I wanted to keep, as much of it focused as I could. You can see the plants are blowing. There's nothing you can do. That's even at an 800th of a second, but I'm doing my best. And hand holding was kind of the way to go without getting out and getting a stone bag set up. We just didn't get up there in time, and it was just beautiful. This is the reason that you go up to Steptoe. This is a less windy day, a really beautiful lit evening. We didn't get the same kind of magical sunset light, but we got that magic light on the landscape. And it's fun, here's a 500 millimeter, and it was pretty windy. I'm definitely employing the stone bag, but it wasn't as windy. The last night we were out there working, we worked with long lenses and the similar type of wind. We were welcomed in and ushered out on just hurricane force winds up there. But I love the abstracts you can do with those rolling farmland hills, granaries, just that texture stretching to the horizon. These little structures, here's just, these beautiful bucolic farm scenes, spectacular stuff. This night ended with that thunderhead in the far distance lighting up beautiful colors and nothing else in the land. No natural light because there was clouds to our west as the sun was setting, so we got no light playing across the landscape, but still some beautiful things to do. Most of these are just a little bit of editing. This one is in HDR because there was so much dynamic contrast. But my other favorite thing to do is just drive these backcountry roads and the dirt roads, photographing, as you roll along, and the different scenes and the cloudscapes. There's similar, the Grand Tetons, Patagonia, and the Palouse just yield these ever-changing epic cloudscapes that make you stop and say, I've got to get out and photograph these clouds. It's amazing. And the little towns feel a little bit like the hands of time have stopped. Here's El Jefe and Palouse. Fun stuff. I found an old Hudson automobile that's always parked there in Palouse, and I'm showing off kind of the close focus capability of that little 24 to 70 f4S lens, which I just adore working with that lens as my knock around on my hip going out to lunch in town type lens. I think I may actually put this up as a print in the house. I'm looking forward to printing this one. Again, going out there, this was another windy night, and even with the 500 on the tripod in the wind, it locks down that stone bag, that nice rigid 500 AH. This is with my 500 PF. Pretty darn awesome. This is a 500 millimeter portrait of Rick working out there. I love the backgrounds you can get. This is a wonderful place to photograph, and it's different every night. I love to go up there 4 or 5 times in a row and find a completely different look to it each and every time. we were getting ready for the blood supermoon set with the partial eclipse that was going to happen the next morning. I started thinking about vertical panoramas, maybe putting that moon with the foreground, and I was just hoping for light like this. This is the last light of the day. I was thinking it would be amazing. We knew right where it was going to be. It was going to be right behind that Whitman Growers granary. And the next morning, there was haze on the horizon. There was a gap between clouds, and the moon shot up through the gap, went into the haze as it went low, so it's a little bit obstructed, but still, there it is. And this is shot as a vertical panorama with that granary in the foreground. Whoops. There it is. It was hazy. So, I sort of did all I could to bring out all the clarity I could, but the whole scene was a little bit hazy. I still think it'll print nicely, relatively large size. I haven't gone in and done a whole bunch of work on this. I ran it through DxO's Deep Prime to get rid of some of the noise, but I haven't done a whole bunch to it. It's a fun pano. It's about a 9-frame panoramic merger. If we look at the pixel density of it, it's pretty good size, 13,000 pixels high. It should be fun to work with. But then we turned around, and it's that look over the shoulder moment. And even though this cloud was blocking us from that early morning sun as the moon set, once the moon set, as it came up, it came blasting through and put these just amazing rays across that farmland landscape to the east. So that was really cool. And here's the windy last night that we were out, and there's Rick with his rock, and my sandbag I carried down from the van. It's a little more comfortable to carry a sandbag with a strap than a rock under your arm, but I played around with the little Nisi Sunstar 15 millimeter lens. It doesn't give any exposure information, but this is at f8 at its kind of sweet spot for sharpness, and it is nice and sharp, despite throwing a Sunstar through Rick's fluid head there. A fun lens to work with. That was the last thing that I brought with me that I hadn't used, so I felt like I needed to use it that night. Here's a still of Rick at 200 millimeter or at 100 millimeters and just raging winds. I shot a little bit of video of this too, and just to show, the fluid head will lock you down in really high winds with a long lens. There was haze once again. But shooting the closer up objects were pretty sharp. The wind was just raging, so any trees are going to be kind of blurred because their foliage is moving so fast. But structures and everything were nice and sharp in this, and I kind of love the fade to just nothing. It almost looks like there's a fog, but in reality that is just dust and dirt entrained in those really high winds that are ripping through. This is this scene kind of shooting just a little bit to the north of west as the sun's setting over here, and it was just backlighting all that dust, and you get just this kind of soft hint of all those rolling hills. And then the final shot as it came down through, backlighting that whole landscape. It was just an incredible trip. All right, so with that, I think you can all see why I love going there so much. We didn't even go to Palouse Falls, which is a beautiful waterfall to take people to. We've had some spectacular workshops there. We're talking about running another one in spring of 2022. Keep an eye open for that one opening up. Hit me up via email if you want advance notice of it. It's a beautiful place to go shoot. Rick and I love it there, and we have a ton of fun. We're going to have an office hours. We're opening up submissions to that office hours, talking about long exposures, and we're accepting images of your long exposure photography. Send us your favorite long exposure image. Great if it's taken recently, but it can be your favorite long exposure image. Those office hours are going to be on June 22nd, Tuesday, 10 a.m. Pacific. You can sign up at hudsonhenry.com/office hours. Sign up, you can join us on Zoom. It's fun to see all your faces and interact a little bit more. We can also, you can watch it on YouTube Live as well, and they're archived on YouTube Live. We had a great one. I'm filming this on a Tuesday. We had a great one this morning about night photography in the Milky Way. You can check that out. I'll put a link in the video's description. Again, links to all the stuff that I'm talking about are in the video's description. Easy to go for. You can also go to hudsonhenry.com/ATS links, and all that stuff is there. If you don't have a stone bag, it's so much better than a hook on the bottom of your tripod head with your bag waving around. It's way more flexible. Plus, when you don't have the sandbag in there, it and it's not blowing and crazy windy, you can put all kinds of things that you're working with in there, you know, changing lenses, working with filters. It just winds up being a shelf. You know, you have to be careful as you move from position to position that things don't fall out and you lose them. But it's just a handy thing, and it folds up in the middle of the tripod like nothing when you close it and go to work someplace else. All right, everybody, thanks so much. I hope you're all out enjoying some better weather for those of us in the Northern Hemisphere that are coming into summer. I hope you join the office hours, and I hope everyone's staying safe, staying healthy, and we'll see you next week.